Spirituality and faith are what hold our communities together in New Mexico. It is through our connection to the land and to the water that connect us to each other. My grandma, Joan Romero, was my example of what it means to be a woman of faith. My grandma, Joan Romero, was born at the peak of Mount Taylor, New Mexico, although she lived most of her life in Tomé. Mount Taylor is located just outside of San Rafael, near Grants, and this was my grandma's stomping ground as a child. Before she passed away, my grandma shared many stories with me about her experiences living at the peak of the mountain, and more specifically, about how local and familial customs rooted her in faith even as a baby. Although she was very young, my grandma knew that she would lead a life of faith. Along with her older sister, Ellen June, my grandma would lead spiritual and ceremonial processions around the mountain, giving thanks and praise to the Blessed Virgin Mary. During the procession, she and her sister would pick flowers as offerings while leading the community in song and prayer. One of my grandma's final requests for me before she joined my antepasados was to plant a red rose bush in front of the Blessed Virgin Mary statue that stands beautifully behind my house. She also reminded me to always leave flowers at her feet. My grandma would also pray the rosary every day, and this was an important spiritual practice that she committed to for 84 years. One night, soon after she passed away, my mother found a rosary underneath her pillow. This was my grandma's way of informing my mother that it was now her turn to carry the spiritual practice of praying the rosary each day. Besides her family, her kids and grandkids, she only had one true love in life, and that was working the land. For as long as I can remember, up until she couldn't walk without the assistance of a walker, she would wake up before the sun to begin doing yard work. My grandma, my mom, and I have lived for 33 years on approximately 7 acres of land just east of the last acequia in Tomé, and my grandma dedicated much of her life to caring for it. When my mom first built a house next door to my grandma, the land surrounding both houses was completely barren. Because we live beyond the boundary of the last acequia, we do not have access to the amount of water needed for large-scale agriculture. Despite this particular type of adversity, living on very dry land, my grandma was determined to bring it to life. Throughout my life, my grandma has planted cottonless cottonwoods, willows, pine trees of various types, roses, plum trees, apricot trees, lavender flowers, lilacs, grapevines, watermelon vines, honeydew vines, and cantaloupe vines. Initially, many of the trees and plants did not survive. We went many years without the successful growth of trees and plants because the land was simply too dry. My grandma would plant them, and they would be gone by the end of the summer. Then, miraculously, about 15 years ago, we received more rain than usual. The trees that she planted that summer made their journey to the sky and never looked back. My grandma always had faith that she would successfully bring life to the land, and she did. For my grandma and for many people in our community, working the land is what connects us to each other, and it's what connects us to life. I'm thankful to have had the opportunity to be guided by my grandma to care for the land. This is a learning process that has been manifested by my grandma since I was a little girl. However, my passion and spiritual connection to the land became evident when my grandma was unable to walk, and she passed on the responsibility to me. I knew that it was my turn, and someday I hope that my mom and I have the opportunity to pass the torch to my future children. While my grandma was in the hospital during her last couple of months on this earth, we would have conversations over the phone, and she would coach me. Make sure to transplant the seedlings, chiquita. Plant them in the way back. I can still hear her voice. I always will, especially when I am caring for the land, just as she had done.